Hello chess friends and welcome to your of Chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Game decline studies. So in this studies we have seen some great openings and great defenses after first moves d4, d5 and c4, and today we're continuing with our Queen's Game decline studies and the so-called Cambridge Springs defense. And the Cambridge Springs defense we have started recently. First of all, I've introduced to you the most important tactical traps that are possible in an early stage of the game, and today we're continuing with our Queen's Game decline studies Cambridge Springs defense with the so-called Yugoslav variation. And the Yugoslav variation is the most often and most common line that I think you'll see in the Cambridge Springs defense, but today we'll analyze again the game a little bit more from Black's perspective, because I think it's very important to continue really to study this beautiful Cambridge Springs defense more and more from Black's perspective, because I think this opening, this defense can be really your lifetime repertoire, and I think you could have really a good setup, a good continuation, and if you know of course where the game is going, I think I guarantee you have not so many tactical problems in an early stage of the game. Actually, you're the one that are threatening your opponent in the beginning of the game. So in my opinion, the Cambridge Springs defense is one of the best methods against d4. So let's see now what is this beautiful opening and what is now the so-called Yugoslav variation of the Cambridge Springs defense. So the first move is now the move d4. We'll just make this first move a little bit fast, because this Cambridge Springs defense, this Cambridge Springs setup can actually come out of many openings. So first of all, we're playing maybe the move knight to f6. Now after move c4, we're going maybe e6. We're delaying simply the moves. We're waiting now white to make a move. After move knight to f3, we're playing now the move d5, going into the Queen's Game decline setup. And now after move knight to c3, we're playing now this move knight to d7. And this is now the so-called barman variation. I recommend you to go into this structure. I've explained it in my previous videos. So why should you go into this particular line? Because with the move knight to d7, we are delaying the bishop's move. This is very important here to say, because if you're delaying the bishop's move, still you have a flexibility to go wherever you want to go. You can still go bishop to d6, bishop to e7 if necessary. You can go even bishop to b4, pinning the knight here on c3. So you have a certain flexibility. That's the beauty about this move knight to d7. And basically white needs now to already make a reaction. If white places the move e3, then he's simply locking out his dark blue bishop. So basically in many of these setups, white wants to first get out with the bishop on f4, maybe to g5, and then he wants to play e3, connecting of course the bishop here to the pawn on c4. So that's why here we're analyzing now this particular move bishop to g5. And if you're bothered by this move bishop to f4, we have explained it already in our series so far. You should search the Queen's Game decline studies with the so-called Samish variation. We have explained the Samish variation with the move bishop to f4, when of course white is continuing the pressure around the square c7. So if you're bothered with this line, please, as I said, check out our Samish variation of the Queen's Game decline study. So now we're analyzing this particular move, where the bishop to g5 creates of course an annoying pin against the knight on f6. But the beauty about the Cambridge Springs defense is, as I've mentioned it before, is that we're having here already a beautiful connection between both of this knight. So if you pick up the knight on f6, then of course this other knight can recapture on f6. You never are threatening to get this messed up pawn structure with the move g takes f6 or something. That gives us the power to play the move c6, and then of course liberating our queen out of this pin with the move queen to a5. And that's the actual Cambridge Springs goal. That's the actual Cambridge Springs defense setup. So in the continuation, after move bishop to g5, we're playing now the move c6. We are having here a solid pawn structure. We have here really a nice pyramid, really a solid setup in the center of the game. But here the problem I think of this setup is a little bit this light square bishop. The light square bishop is, I think, the main issue of the Cambridge Springs defense. That's I think the only weakness that we have in the position. So after move c6, notice that the bishop is blocked out. But in this particular video, I want you to show you how to improve the activity of the bishop on c8. There is a method that we'll see now in a couple of examples, which I think give you a really good game with your light square bishop, because as I said, that's the only thing that always bothered me. Everything is perfectly fine. The knights are good. We have a good central control. We have a good activity with the bishop bishop on b4. We have a good activity with the queen on a5, but the bishop on c8 is a little bit bad, so that's why it's very important to know how to improve the bishop on c8. So after move queen to a5, we're playing now the move after move e3. We're playing now the move queen to a5 in this particular setup, and now it becomes the so-called Cambridge Spring defense. And what should white do? White, in my opinion, has to play now the so-called Yugoslav variation with the move c takes d5, and we should now take with the knight. Don't pick up with the pawn, because if you pick up with the pawn structure gets static in the center of the board, and in the near future we can expect ideas of a3, b4. Your queen gets a little bit exposed here already, because you played with your queen on a5, so that's why I recommend you to pick up the pawn with the knight. Knight to d5 creates, of course, immediately a pressure against the knight on c3, and your opponent has to make already a reaction. So many times white will continue the game with the move queen to d2, which is the best method here for white, and we are continuing now with the pressure with the move bishop to b4. And I think this is a beautiful setup. This is a good method. We have already the pressure around the square c3. Notice, as I mentioned also in my previous video, there is this connection between the queen and the bishop on g5. For instance, if the knight somehow moves somewhere, if the knight is not connected anymore to the bishop, there are always some threats maybe to pick up the bishop on g5 with the move queen to g5. So you should not forget about this. Maybe in this particular position it's not working, but as a long-term tactic, you should always consider maybe to pick up this bishop that's loose a little bit here on the board. So now white will continue with the move rook to c1. Notice that when after rook to c1, white is connecting a further piece to the square c3, but loses also tempo in the beginning of the game. That's, I think, the beauty about the Cambridge Spring defense. While your opponent is defending the position, meanwhile you can castle, you can develop, of course, your minor pieces. And notice there is always also this particular problem. After move a3, you don't have to even retreat with your dark square bishop, because there is always also the tension around the square a1, because your opponent cannot pick up the bishop on b4. He simply loses the rook. That's also something that should be considered, because the queen has left now the defense of the first rank. So as I said, many tactics are possible, so that's why your opponent will try this idea, this method, rook to c1. And now let's study this particular position. I guarantee you, if you're playing the Cambridge Spring defense, this will be sort of a cornerstone position that you play, I think, millions and millions of times. Now it's time to improve our light square bishop's activity. So as I said, that's the only thing that bothers me in the position. So that's why, in my opinion, one of the best methods is to go here with the move b6. And it seems strange, it seems weird, because your queen is a little bit blocked out but now by its own pawn. But as I said, we have this beautiful activity, because even if a3 happens, we have always knight to c3, b to c3, bishop to a3. We can always pick up the pawn. So I don't think that this queen on a5 will be endangered here at all. So white cannot trap the queen or something, although this bishop b6 move keeps, I think, a little bit the queen locked. But as I said, it makes now a very important idea. It creates now sort of a square. The bishop can come now to a6. The light square bishop can be finally traded off for the beautiful bishop on f1, because if we are watching now the light square activities of these bishops, then we can agree, I think, the light square bishop of white is simply the best minor piece of white's, because when it comes to d3, it controls, of course, both of these diagonals. So that's why we're giving up with the move bishop to a6 our worst piece against our opponent's best piece. That's, I think, good positional trades of pieces. So with this b6 method here, we are already preparing bishop to a6. I think this idea is simply beautiful. So in the continuation, your opponent will probably try bishop to d3, and we should play now simply bishop to a6. You can play, of course, also different move orders. You don't have to play immediately b6 bishop to a6. You can play even the h6, kick away the bishop a little bit. You can play some different ideas, but you can, of course, castle immediately, then to play move b6. But I think playing aggressively already is also perfectly fine. So now let's watch one game. It's Etienne Bacro against Shakir Mamedjarov. In the game, Efim Bogoljubov castled, and here Shaka Mamedjadov also castled in this particular position. In the continuation, Efim Bogoljubov tried this aggressive move e4, and this move may bother you. You may think now, okay, something went wrong. Look at this. My opponent is creating now pawn storm in the center of the board. He kicks away my knight. He has now this powerful light square bishop. He has a good activity with the queen, with the bishop. I don't have good defenders because my knights are a little bit misplaced. I don't have any defenders of the king. Okay, this may bother you, but in my opinion, you should know now a different continuation. In my opinion, this is nothing spectacular for white because we're simply continuing with knight to c3, and after b takes c3, now comes a very important tempo, bishop to a3. This move gives us simply more time in order to regroup, in order to get more pieces into defense. Okay, we can agree. Our opponent has the powerful central control, but this pawn central control, this pawn storm in the center of the board can be broken with ideas of c5, or if necessary, if maybe possible, in this particular position it's of course not possible, but maybe with the move e5 we can simply break through here. We can really paralyze the main strength that white has here now, which we said is the powerful pawn central control. So in the continuation, rook to e1 was played by Efim Bogoljubov, and now Shak breaks the position immediately with move c5. This is the way to go. You have to make some kind of a reaction. After bishop to a6, queen to a6, here Efim Bogoljubov tried the move e5. Even if you try d5 here, I've analyzed this move. d5 seems reasonable because you want to, of course, to connect somehow here this pawn to the move c4 and similar stuff. You want to create further ideas to break and enter here in the position. This move should not bother you because we can play now b5 immediately. Look at this. If d takes e6 happens, we still have a connection now on the 6th rank. The queen is connected now to the pawn, and I think this is a solid game. So, for instance, if your opponent tries somehow again to regroup on the d file, then of course we can pick it up. But with the move b5, it's very important to control, I think, the square c4. If these pawns are getting connected c4, d5, e4, then I think you could have really huge positional problems. So after move queen to a6, Efim Bogoljubov tried e5. We have c takes d4, queen to d4, and now after queen to b7, we have here queen to a4, hitting the bishop, and now bishop to c5, improve simply the position of the piece. We have now rook to d1, b5, hitting the queen, and now the position gets already very tactical. Queen to g5 was Efim Bogoljubov's move. Very nice tactics because he's trying bishop to h6 or bishop to f6. He's trying here a checkmate, but of course Shak recognized these possibilities. Plays now rook to c8, a beautiful counterattack because after bishop to f6, here Shak protects the position with bishop to f8. We have here knight to g5, and it seems so that this is getting wrong here for black because white is building really a beautiful attacking formation, but Shak kept it calm here with this beautiful move. Rook to c4, rook to d4, rook takes d4, c takes d4, and now Shak calculated this in a good way. He simply took the bishop. He's saying, show me what you got with your attack because I have many defenders in front of the king. We have knight to e4, discovered attack, king to h8, we have e takes f6, but now after h6 the game is basically over. No threats are possible. The queen is coming into the game. We can trade it off. This pawn is weak. Let's see a couple more moves. a3, h3 was played, queen to d5, rook to c1, now b4. Shak continues the pressure. We have here queen to d4, g3, knight to f6 here. Shak grabs simply too much material, and after a couple more moves the game was over. So in my opinion, as I said, let's go back to this critical line. In this particular position, when your opponent is playing the move rook to c1, I recommend you here to play the move b6, getting your bishop out to a6. Continue now with rook to c8, kingside castling, rook to e8, the bishop to f8, and similar stuff. But if you are getting destroyed in the center of the board with e4 breakthroughs, you should break and enter with the move c5. You should not tolerate your opponent that he has such a powerful central control with his pawns. That's, I think, one of the main issues that bother us in the continuation of the game in the Cambridge Springs defense. So be careful, but if you're having the possibility, break the position, break the pawn chain in the center of the board. So let's see now another example. It's a beautiful game played by Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhaa versus Ding Liren. Again, the same setup, again, the same idea. C takes d5, knight to d5. So please take it out with your knight. Don't take out this pawn with any of your pawns. If that happens, I think you could have two similar positions in the semi-Slav, like in the semi-Slav structures, and now, as I said, the queen gets simply too endangered, and you could have really positional problems. So in the game, knight to d5, also here played by Ding Litten, we have queen to d2, and now again this method, bishop to b4, rook to c1. Now you see Ding tried a different move order. Nothing wrong with this move. You can be really flexible here. You can castle. Nothing wrong with any of these moves here for black. So after move h6 here, Prague play bishop to h4, and now again that's the most important thing here to say. We are playing our same method. We're playing again this b6 method. A very important move in order to find it, to get our bishop out, in order to get our worst piece into the game. So in the continuation, bishop to d3, bishop to a6, again the same method, kingside castling, again this idea, e4, knight to c3, b takes c3, and again we get this extra tempo with the move bishop to a3, rook to d1. This move is actually much more correct, I think, by Prague than in the previous line. In the previous line, Etienne Bacro tried rook to e1, but I think it's very important here to play rook to d1, because the knight is a little bit loose here on d7. With the c5 breakthrough goal that happened in the previous game that we have analyzed, if something gets cleared, I think the knight could be endangered here, so that's why you want to create a battery. But here I think again, Ding Litten showed his great positional skills. He plays rook to e8 against this move, and he still has now flexibility to maybe reroute a knight on f8. This move is very good in some very good in some occasions, because sometimes your knight gets on f8 and you have a good defensive piece in front of your own king, because we can agree, I think in this particular position we are lacking in defenders. That's, I think, also something that could bother you. We have a good activity, we have good pressure, we have good positional trades of pieces as a possibility, but we don't have good defensive resources. So rook to e8, a good move here by Ding. So rook to e1, now bishop to d3, again simplifying the game, rook to c8, and now b5. b5 is a beautiful move. This move creates a new pawn on light square, because we have now the dark square bishop, and we got rid of our light square bishop. Now it's very important to keep all of these pawns in the center on light squares, and now we can even reroute our knight maybe to b6. Knight to c4 is an opportunity. That's now a beautiful square for the knight. Good game again by Ding. So rook to e2, we have now queen to a4, rook to e1, we have now bishop to f8, g5, and now finally c5. You see, now again Ding breaks the position with the same motif. We have now the move d5, as we said, but now after move c4, queen to d2, b4. Here Ding plays a beautiful move. Again, he's connecting now the queen to the knight here. If something gets cleared, of course, like this, d takes e6, that was here Pragranada's continuation. We have rook to e6. Again, we don't have to mess up our pawn structure with move f takes e6. Very important move. The queen is now connected to the knight, and from this point on, actually, black is much better. Don't forget about this. We have here beautiful pawn majority. We have a 3 versus 2 situation on the queen side. So we have talked about pawn majorities in one of my chess strategy videos. You can check it out. Here's the link of the video. Please do so, because we have explained this endgame motifs that can happen to you in this particular position. If this game reaches a fully endgame, if something gets cleared, if all of these pieces are off the board, then black should be winning here because of the possibility to create a distant pass pawn. The king is too far away from the action. So now Ding is saying, I have a good situation on the queen side. I have now a beautiful rook lift. Now I simply push the pawns further. So here the continuation, we have now knight to d4, rook to b6, queen to d1, queen takes d1, and after a couple trades of pieces here, finally rook to c2 would play, but now knight to c5 hits, of course, here the pawn on e4. Here Prague took, but also after knight to e4, the game is basically over. Here, after a couple of more moves, Ding managed to push the pawns further. He included now simply more pieces into the game. We have now a4, rook to b3 hits the knight, and now after bishop to d2, rook to c2, and c3, here in this particular position, actually Prague resigned. So you see, this pawn is weak. We have now this powerful pawn here, so it's simply too much pressure. This bishop is far away from the action. The knight will come into the game somehow. So gloss came here for white. So incredible. I think this motifs, again, let's repeat, really, really important stuff. After move queen to a5, and here this particular move order now b6, and when the time comes, we should break and enter the position, as we said, with the move c5. c5 is a very important motif that simply doesn't tolerate anymore this pawn storm that's coming to us. So that's why very important here also strategy by Ding. He simply destroyed his pawn center and managed to create here a pawn majority on the queen side. So let's see now another example. Here we have a position between two top engines. It's Berserk versus the Stockfish engine, the greatest engine in the world. And again, the same position, but now in one game, as I said here, Berserk versus Stockfish. Berserk tried this idea: queen to b3, protecting now the knight in a different way without playing the move queen to d2. But again, our plan stays the same, I think. Bishop to b4, look at this, rook to c1. Now we can even play the move e5. e5 after move queen to b3 is a very important motif. I recommend you this, because look what happens. If you play now knight to e5, the game leads into complications, really full complicated game now for white to play, because now we can play knight to e5, d takes e5, and now we can play bishop to e6, and this is now really, really tough to play for white. White has to play, I think, now really the best top engine moves, and I really didn't even find any games in the database in this particular line, so probably white doesn't want to reach this position. Look at this, with the move bishop to e6. Okay, we lost the pawn, it doesn't matter, but now the activity around the square c3, the activity around the queen on b3 is something that bothers now white in the continuation of the game. As we said also, we still have our attack on the 5th rank. The pawn on e5 is weak, the bishop on g5 is a little bit loose. So in my opinion, again, a great game here for black. So that's why after move e5, this gives us again new time in order to be aggressive here. The Berserk engine played now bishop to c4, continued now the pressure against the knight on d5, but now Stockfish simply grabs more space with the move e4. You cannot take, of course, because of the beautiful bishop's activity, because of this beautiful pin. So see, again, new method. So this move queen to b3 should be met with an early e5. I think this is perfectly fine. So here knight to d2 was played by Berserk, knight to b6, bishop to d5, c takes d5, kingside castling, and now also kingside castling. Look at this, the queen is connected now to the pawn. We have now a3, bishop to c3, queen to c3, and after b takes c3, rook to c3, we have now bishop to g4, bishop to f4, and here after move rook to c8, Stockfish managed to grab more spaces here on the c file. He finally competed with this rook. He has a good connection here with his bishop, with both of these knights, so nothing can happen on the c file. So here a solid game. So this is a drawish line. This game ended with a draw, but if you are bothered with this move queen to b3 move, I guarantee you with an early e5, I think you could have fun. So first bishop to b4, and now e5 is breaking the position. But you don't have to, of course. You can play still kingside castling, play maybe the same idea, bishop b6, bishop to a6, and I think you could have, again, a solid game. So this was it. This was now our study of the Yugoslav attack from black's perspective. Please check it out. Please do also some of your analysis, because of course I cannot cover everything now in our studies. I think the main ideas, the main methods are very important to recognize. Then of course later the game can change. The strategy remains the same, but the tactical goals change, of course. And then of course you have to worry, you have to be careful what you're doing. But I think with this b6, bishop to a6 method, you're getting out with your worst piece on the board, and then you're breaking the position, because with the move b6 you have also a good preparation to push the pawn on c5. As we said, white will eventually grab the center with the move e4, but with the move c5 the position has to be broken. So in my opinion, good method, which gives you, I think, a solid game. You're playing, I don't know, maybe 20 moves without even thinking so much about the position, because you know these things are going to happen to you. White doesn't have so many counterplay possibilities. In my opinion, this line is a good method against this white's approach. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this analysis of our Cambridge Springs defense. If you want to see more about the Cambridge Springs defense, Please check out our video before. We have analyzed, as I said, the most important tactical rules and beautiful traps in an early stage of the game. Here's also a link of the video. And if you want to see more about the Queen's Gambit Declined, please check out our whole series. We have now almost 100 videos about the Queen's Gambit Declined with the Taraj defense, semi-Taraj defense, Chigorin defense, and many, many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.